Welcome to another session on methodology of literature. We continue with Sigmund Freud. Freud, in his work Civilization and its Discontents, speak about the two principles at work in a society: the pleasure principle and the reality principle. The pleasure principle asks the individual to do whatever he feels good, but the reality principle urges people to subordinate pleasure to more important things. Another important concept that Freud speaks about is the three-part system of human psyche: the id, ego, and superego. They develop at different stages of our life. They work together to create a complex human behavior, that is us. So what is id? Id is the primitive and unconscious part of our personality. When a child is born, his personality is all id. What is id? I demand immediate satisfaction. I don't care if it's good or bad, but whatever gives me satisfaction and pleasure, I want it. This is id. It operates on pleasure principle. It says that every wishful impulse should be satisfied immediately, regardless of the consequence. For example, a small kid sees a balloon held by somebody. He starts crying for it. The child cries till he gets it or goes to sleep. So for a kid, pleasure principle works more. Then comes the superego. Superego incorporates the values and morals in the society which we learn from parents and the society. It is the conscious part of the brain, and the main function is the moralistic principles. Superego insists that we only do things which are morally right. So when we grow up, parents, teachers, society teaches us certain values, like for instance, honesty is the best policy, truth is better than lies, never steal, etc. These things that we learn from our culture, from our society, becomes a part of our superego. Superego incorporates all the values and morals. So we know that one who grows with id can never sustain in a society. He finds, for instance, he finds a car attractive and the car belongs, even if the car belongs to a stranger, he would steal the car because he only wants his desires to be fulfilled. Likewise, if one is fully based on superego, then also you cannot sustain in this world, because extreme morality will put you in a fix. So then comes the third component of the human psyche: ego, or reality check. Because ego, or the conscious mind, is pulled between the two extremes of id and superego. If you take id and superego, ego is going to strike a balance between the two. It is going to operate according to the reality principle, working in a realistic way of satisfying the id and compromising sometimes the satisfaction, that is ego, a little. For example, if I like to have an ice cream now, and it is definitely not the time to have cold food with the rains and the pandemic, my ego will strike a balance. It will tell me or advise me to refrain from cold food or taking cold food, because my physical health will be affected, and I can eat as much as I like when everything is normal. But superego would tell me that ice cream as such is bad. It is not good to have it at all. So it says I want the ice cream right now, but ego creates a balance. It is postponing the satisfaction and compromising the instant satisfaction. But then at the same time, it is going to help you balance your behavior according to the realistic values. Ego's role is to prevent the id from gratifying itself in inappropriate ways. For example, I am angry at someone. If I am working on the id pleasure principle, I would knock him down, but my ego would ask me to keep calm and would speak to him and deal with him later face to face in a more appropriate and mature manner. Remember, the ego we speak of, that is the ego that Freud speaks of, is different from the ego in our day-to-day life, which is attitude, the mundane meaning of ego, which is attitude. It's different. The next concept that Freud introduces is a psychosexual concept. According to Freud, a person goes through a few stages of development to become an adult. Each stage has their special conflicts, and these conflicts will influence a child's personality. So he says that in every stage of development, we need to train the child in such a manner that neither his gratification nor his frustration should be too much. According to Freud, libido is a part of the body which will give you instant satisfaction. And this libido keeps shifting from each stage. So child has to be raised in such a way that his libido is not gratified too much, nor should it be restricted. That is, he should not be frustrated too much. Because if any such things should happen, then the child will be fixated at that stage and he would never grow up. Fixation is an inability to progress normally from one stage to another. Freud also defines man as a sexual animal. He is always into pleasure dimensions. Human beings are libidinal. It is the sexual drives or force by which the sexual instinct is represented in the mind. To Freud, everything is associated with sexuality. Mother nurturing the baby has an erotic dimension associated with the erotogenic zone, the mouth. Similarly, the instincts for food, warmth, and comfort also produce pleasure, which Freud defines as sexual pleasure. The erotogenic zones which Freud identifies are the oral, anal, phallic, the three major stages of childhood. The oral stage is the first stage, that is 0 to 1. In this stage, the libido is centered in baby's mouth. It begins with the baby's first experience of breastfeeding. You may have seen babies putting their head in the mouth. They love to put things in their mouth. Why? Because it gets satisfaction from his mouth. He knows no boundaries between self and the other as he takes things or whatever comes to his hand. Thus, his libido is satisfied, which at this stage is mouth oriented. Freud says that oral fixation can happen when you don't allow child to put things in its mouth. He will grow physically, but emotionally he will be fixed in this stage. That is why you see those oral personalities like smokers, nail biters, finger chewers, thumb suckers, etc. Oral personalities when the child is under stress, and this leads to a fixation as he or she tries to gain pleasure through his or her mouth. The second stage is the anal stage, that is 1 to 3 years. During this stage, the primary focus of the libido is in controlling the bladder or bowel movement. Through toilet training, the child, he learns his bodily needs. According to Freud, success depends upon the way parents approach this toilet training. If parents are extremely negative, if the parents are or if the parents are too lenient, that is, the child can urinate or pass motion anywhere in the house, then Freud says that it's an anal expulsive personality. This can develop, and these people who are not trained properly, they'll become messy and unorganized in the later stages of life. And if the parents become too strict in toilet training, then the child will become retentive personality. Anal retentive personalities are extremely rigid, obsessive, and orderly and organized. The third stage is the phallic stage, that is 3 to 6 years. During this stage, the primary focus of the libido is on the genital parts. At this stage, children begin to discover the difference between male and female. This is when the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex start to develop. Oedipus complex refers to the male child's sexual desire for his mother. According to Freud, a male child will feel sexually attracted towards his mother. When the child sees a romance scene between the father and mother, then he or she, that is the male child, feels angry towards the father in his unconscious mind. The child is, however, unaware of it. It happens inside the child. He starts hating his father because he sees him as a rival, an obstacle towards his love for his mother, who takes a part of love from him. Now, when a girl child undergoes the same feeling, that is love for her father, and mother becomes the rival, it is called Electra complex. So when the boy and the girl feels this attitude, in order to grab the love from either the mother or the father, they start mimicking their father or mother, because they feel or believe that mother and father will like him or her if he does something of that sort. This is how they are going to get affected psychologically. The attitude of the parents at this stage will determine the sexual attitudes of these kids in the adult life. If parents use punishment, then they'll have an adverse effect in their sexual life. Now, Freud develops this idea from the Greek philosopher Sophocles, who wrote Oedipus Rex, when he speaks about Oedipus, who killed his father to wed his mother unknowingly, not knowing that she was the mother, that is. But upon the revelation of it, he blinded himself. Freud believes that Oedipus was in love with his mother, and thus he developed this complex. Freud feels that all children fall in love with one parent and feels hatred towards the other. And you can see that in Shakespeare's plays Hamlet. Hamlet's inability to take revenge on his father's murderer is because he is suffering from Oedipus complex, according to Freud. Deep in his unconscious mind, he always wanted his father out of the way. Thus, when he tries to kill Claudius, he feels he's committing the same crime himself, because he has always wanted to kill his father and remove him out from his way to get his mother's love. Therefore, he is reluctant to kill Claudius. Thus, he is unable to take revenge. So you see how psychoanalytical theory works in literature. By using Oedipus and Electra complex, you understand the hidden impulses in these fictional characters. The next stage, that is the fourth stage, is the latency stage, that is the puberty. The development of ego and superego contribute the calmness of this stage. This is the stage where the child is taught a lot more of moral values. So the ego and the superego is developing. Till 6, the child is in the id stage, but now when ego and superego develops, they get involved with others and have hobbies, develops the right conduct, and so on. There is no libido in this period. The genital period is from puberty to adult life. This is the final psychosexual development. Here, the individual develops sexual attraction towards the opposite sex. This begins at puberty and goes on till the end of his life. Freud says that if anything happens during any of these stages, then it will reflect in the later stages of life. Next person or next psychoanalytical critic is Jacques Lacan. Jacques Lacan is a famous psychoanalyst like Freud. He is a French psychoanalyst and is called the French Freud. He too started his career like Freud as a medical practitioner with a medical degree. From about 1930 until his death, he was the most influential figure in psychoanalytic circle. He was greatly influenced by the works of Saussure and Lévi-Strauss, the two eminent structuralists. He presented his famous paper called Mirror Stage in 1936. However, he was something of a rebel and was expelled from the International Psychoanalytic Association. By 1966, his fame as a structuralist psychoanalyst spread far and wide, and with Lacan was born the psychoanalytical criticism and theory. Lacan was always interested in rewriting, reinterpreting classical Freudian psychoanalysis, and that too in the light of the post-structuralist theories. He dismisses Freud's notion of the instinctual unconscious that precedes language. In Lacan, the centrality is on language. According to him, the unconscious is structured like a language. That is, it is the product of a language. Lacanian psychoanalysis had interdisciplinary connections with linguists and linguistics, philosophies, and mathematics. Lacan was greatly traumatized by the Second World War. His magnum opus Eccritis came after the World War, that is in 1966. His famous return to Freud, and here in 1951, Lacan criticized the contemporary changes that took place in psychoanalysis, and he exhorted a return to Freud, which means a close reading of Freud. He returns at the same time he also deviates from Freud in the sense that to Lacan the unconscious is to be understood as intimately tied to the functions and dynamics of language. Lacanian reading attempted to correct the flaws of Freudian theory, especially the privilege that it accords to the ego in the self-determination. Freud centered on the ego, which maintains a balance between id and superego. But in Lacan, ego does not take an egocentrical position. To Freud, the unconscious has a structure. According to Freud, the unconscious exists. But to Lacan, what was more important was how it was created and how it is subordinated to the I or ego, whatever lies beneath the subconscious or the unconscious. He believes that the subconscious creates the I or ego. According to him, unconscious is structured like a language. This is the basic idea of Lacanian psychoanalysis, and it has its roots in Lacan's writings, such as insistence of the letter in the unconscious or reason, since Freud. This is the writing that states his theory that the unconscious is structured like a language. Lacan wanted to prove that the unconscious is not just a primitive archetypal part of the mind. We did discuss this when we did archetypal criticism. It is not something where the conscious mind should never know the unconscious, or something that is pushed down from the conscious to the unconscious and is never realized by the conscious mind, or it is a residue of the mind. Lacan tried to state that it is not so. The unconscious is more than that, more than something that is pushed down and not brought to the conscious mind. It is much more than that. It is continually formed, and its formation is a complex one, just like the complex consciousness itself. It is not there as an archive, but it is a continuous complex formation. According to Freud, the unconscious is situated in the psyche, but to Lacan, it is situated in the inter-subject relation, that is, the relationship of the subject with the other, the child with the mother. It is in this inter-subject relationship that the unconscious is situated. And the unconscious is just a signifier with no signified behind it. It keeps changing and developing, but it does not signify anything. For Freud, he believed in the center. He believed ego is a center like the structuralist, and the unconscious is there. But for Lacan, it is just a signifier without a signified. That is one reason why the unconscious is structured like language. The unconscious with underlying desires works like a chain of signification, just like the language. You will never be able to get to the meaning of the word. Another reason is that the unconscious, like the linguistic sign, the subject is internally divided from the mirror stage onwards. Now, the stages of development according to Lacan, Freud, it is different from Freud's stages. Just like Freud talked about the 5 senses or 5 stages of development, similarly Lacan also talked about it, but he gave only 3 stages: the real stage, the imaginary, and the symbolic stage. The real stage is when the subject or a baby is just born. The baby needs to satisfy his needs when he has no separation, or that is, he has no separation from him and the external world. For example, a baby and his mother, both according to him, are the same. So according to Lacan, in this stage, the child is in the state of fullness and completeness. So he keeps, or he's complete about himself. He doesn't feel that he is less or lacks something. That never happens. And that is why Lacan says that the real stage never returns in life. If you have seen a small child, say a 6 months baby, the child is complete in itself. The child has no negative emotions in him or her, and he is not able to separate himself from the world. He feels that he is a part of the world. Is a part of the world in the sense that he's a part of his, like for instance, he identifies himself with his mother. He feels that he's a part of his mother, a section or a part of the mother. He doesn't feel that he's separated or he's different from his mother. For him, he and his mother are the same entity, and this kind of feeling never returns in our life. Thus, the child with no sense of self or individuality or identity sees itself as an extension of the mother's body. All his needs for food and safety are satisfied with an object, and the object is the mother. He does not recognize any distinction between itself and the object that meets its end, or his or her end. This psychic place, that is not a real physical place, is called the Lacanian real. This is because language of the child has not developed. Once the human spoken language develops, we can never come back to this real stage. And because there is no language, there is no loss, no lack, no absence. The child has no language to express his emotions. There is only complete fullness, a perfection. Since the real is always beyond language, it is unrepresentable in language. This phase lasts from birth, that is from birth to 6 or 18, up to 18 months. Next is the mirror or the imaginary stage. This stage is when the child recognizes itself in the mirror for the first time. This is a transition from nature to culture. What he sees in the mirror is his own reflection. So it is a strange experience for the child. Here, the child comes to understand its differences with others, that is, a separation between itself and the mother. When you look at the mirror and try to see who you are, you'll never get to understand who this one-dimensional person is that you see in the figure. Inside, we are all chaotic. We go through a lot of ever-changing personality, our mood swings, our bipolar side, and so on. But on the inside, if you look at yourself, you'll feel that you are a very stable person. As adults, we all want others to understand us in the deepest way. But when we enter in the mirror stage as a child for the first time, we face a lot of conflict because the image I had of myself as a child is different from how I look in the mirror. That is why Lacan says, or he reverses the idea of René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Lacan reverses this idea and he says, I am where I think not. Lacan says the true self is the unconscious, and therefore he says, I am where I think not. Because, like looking into the mirror, we can only see our conscious self, we cannot see our unconscious mind, our desires, etc. By a real or symbolic mirror, the child understands that it has got a separate body, a fragmented one. Rather, the needs or this stage is defined by the concept of demand. The mirror stage is defined by the concept of demand, which is not satisfied with objects. The demand here is a recognition from another for love. As a result of the separation from the mother, which creates a sense of loss, the child demands a return to the state of union with the mother, which is impossible. So, as I told you earlier, the child at a certain age, when they see themselves as an entire being in a mirror, they present themselves disconnected from the unity of the material body, the maternal body, and that is mother. However, the image the child sees is not a true image, but a fantasy of the self. The mirror stage is a misrecognition that inaugurates the imaginary order, a realm of fantasy and imagination. In other words, when the child sees itself in the mirror, it thinks the image is his, but it is only an image. This false sense of self results in the identity formation, and as a result, ego is born. You strive to become the smaller other, which you will never reach. Lacan argues that the ego or self or identity is a fantasy, an identification with the external image and not an internal self or total identity. because inside we are all chaotic beings and we can never understand who we are from inside. This stage Lacan later corrected as, or in the beginning he said that it is something that that exists from between 6 months to 1 year, but later he corrected and said it is a continuous process and not just pertaining to 6 months and 1 year. Lacan uses the term ideal ego to refer to this perfect whole self which has no insufficiency. This whole person the baby mistakes as itself during this stage. This is different from the ego ideal, which forms a part of the third stage, the symbolic stage. This happens when the child for the first time learns language. Once he enters into this stage and learns language, he starts accepting the rules and dictates of the society. Only by accepting the language rules, you will be able to accept the language of the society. So when you learn a word, you learn certain symbolic things as well. Example, mother. This is my mother. She means a lot to me. By accepting the word and learning the language, you accept the responsibilities that you should show or give to your mother. The words we learn are drenched in the pool of dictates of the society. This is called symbolic stage because everything you learn in this stage is symbolic. For example, name of the father. Whenever you think of your father, there are a lot of other laws, other restrictions you associate with the word father. And this laws and restrictions is very symbolic. We don't in fact realize that a word has so many inherent laws and restrictions. These are very symbolic and is attached to the word. This is going to control our desire, our rules of communication. So once we enter into the world of communication, our desire is forever based with the play of language. Then we work according to the rules dictated by the society, and it is stated through language. And if the mirror stage, now let's have a quick look at the mirror stage, the second stage, a comparison between the mirror stage and the symbolic stage. If the mirror stage is the small other, then the symbolic stage is the big other. So when you learn the language, you not only want to become the perfect you, but you want to become somebody else. In the mirror stage, the big other is the mother, the ideal I. The little other is the mirror image. Okay, in the mirror stage, the big other is the mother, the ideal I. You want to be like your mother. The little other, on the other hand, is the mirror image the child sees. In the symbolic stage, you are far removed from reality. It is the big other. The CV you write, for instance, your qualities, your marks, etc. are to an extent your construct. You try to present an ideal you through the construction of language. You are not that. So the language itself presents us the other. It presents itself by ordering structures and it presents itself the ordering structures and grammar in which the imaginary self formulates. Your CV, is it really you? No, it is the language that makes the ideal you. It's not true. It presents the other you, the ideal ego. So the real stage is all about your need, your sleep, your wants, your warmth, etc., what you eat, etc., your needs, the basic needs. In the mirror stage, it's all about your demands. You want a toy, you want warmth, you want to go there, you want to go here. Your demands, you want to be perfect here. And you try to be perfect like like you were in the real stage, but you cannot do that. You identify the other you, the small you, and the symbolic stage is your desire. It is a deeper concept. It is unfulfilled, and it goes through adulthood. Now your demand cannot be fulfilled. Your demand can be fulfilled, but your desires cannot be fulfilled. If imaginary is all about identification, it is representation in language. In the symbolic stage, we have actually lost ourselves. You have the signifier I. Godwin, the real person, or Krishna Prasad, the real person, is lost. Godwin in the CV that he has written, or Krishna Prasad in the CV, now comes to life, or that comes out, and it is not the real you. They have become a signifier, and the signified is completely lost. So Godwin in the CV is the signifier, and the real Godwin, which is different from what is presented in the CV, the signified, the real Godwin is lost. Lacan gave importance to the real as an impossible contradiction within the symbolic order. This impossibility of attaining the real, that is the first stage, that is the perfect stage. Okay, Lacan was greatly influenced by Saussure's theory. He sought to highlight the primacy of the signifier in the psyche, and it is denoted by a capital S bar, small italicized s. Okay, and the signified slips behind or beneath the signifier. The signifier is the big S, and the signified is the small, which is crushed under the signifier's weight. It slides under the signifiers. We can't get it. The signified is under the big dominant arching presence of the signifier, the capital S, that is the signifier, and the small italicized s is the signified, that is the concept. It is lost. We cannot get it. It is crushed by the signifier. Lacan gives this famous example to prove what he stated by S/S. For example, he gives two doors, the example of two doors, one stating gentlemen and the other stating ladies. We know that these are toilets, not a dining room or a bedroom. For children, the two doors means two toilets because of the sign that it is presented, or that is kept on the door. But imagine a child in the early mirror stage. The male child goes into the ladies' toilet, and one day when he grows up, he will begin to realize, and he goes to that he has been going to the wrong toilet. Why? Because these doors mean only toilets to him. The signification, however, is much more than that. The difference between genders, why man should go to man's toilet and woman to the ladies' toilet. The whole weight of culture or cultural perception of gender are contained in these two doors. It is just a door. The signifier is the door, but it has a lot of signification. This signification is crushed under the weight of cultural perception. So when the child grows up, he realizes that, or he does not go to the ladies' toilet, rather he feels that he does a big crime, or he's doing something wrong by rushing into the ladies' toilet. That is, and therefore this clearly shows that this door is a signifier, but what it signifies is a whole cultural burden of gender that cannot be contained in one single signifier. So signification is always incomplete. Now the next concept is of other. Within language, the subject vainly tries to represent itself. The subject is an effect of the signifier that is put into language. Language becomes a mask to disguise the impossibility of desire. For example, Sita is a scholar. She has done many analyses of great people, and she has written many books as well. But she knows that she has trouble mugging up words or cannot reproduce exact words, and she needs a book, or she needs to Google search or use a dictionary. But to others, she's a good scholar or great author. So the real self, the real Sita, the problems of real Sita is hidden or masked, and the language becomes her mask to disguise the impossibility of her desire. Lacanian psychoanalysis. In Lacanian psychoanalysis, the object of it is to help the analysant. Analysant means patient, to recognize and to name his or her desire. What do you want? What is your desire? If you are able to name it and come to terms with it, your psychosis will be, or your neurosis, or your psychosis, your madness will be cured. Desire to Lacan is the desire of the other. From the mirror stage, you desired to be the other. We desire for recognition from the other. We want to be recognized. The greatest pain in childhood is when your parents do not acknowledge you or appreciate you. The mother lacks penis, said Freud. It is a symbol of power, and the child wants power. What the mother lacks, the child wants. What the mother desires, the child wants. These ideas are in fact drawn from Hegel. The idea of desire in Lacan is actually a word play, playing upon the word de, and it refers to the idea that the fundamental desire is the desire for the mother, M in bracket other, mother who is the other. Our desire begins from our desire for the other who is the mother, and this desire originates in the unconscious, which itself is the other. The unconscious is the other, what we cannot understand, what we can't get to easily. That's with Lacan. I want you to read your text well, because I have explained all the concepts of Freud and Lacan, and we shall move to Slavoj Zizek in the next video.